It's all been said.
Everybody hear me okay? Yeah, here I am. Thanks, Crush. Thanks, Dami. It's great reading with everybody up here. I'm sure there's a good word for it. Joe and Kai, great to see you. This is my latest novel, I Loved You More, and this is the section on bullies. And it's 1983 in New York City, and the narrator is a super, which is, I think you all know what a super is. The building on 6th Street, right next to the Ukrainian Catholic Church, was a pain in the ass. The sewer always backed up. As soon as I walked into the foyer, which was every morning, if the basement was full of sewerage, I could smell it, believe me. It was a summer morning because the mimosa tree in front of the church was blooming. The moment I unlocked the door, I could tell it was bad. When I turned the basement light on and looked down, I couldn't believe it. 8 to 10 inches of human shit and toilet paper lapping over the bottom step. It was a weekend too, so my boss wasn't in the office. I immediately walked back to my apartment and put on my Key West shrimper boots. I almost didn't buy the shrimper boots because they were white mid-calf and looked kind of sissy. But as it turned out, those white mid-calf solid rubber boots saved my ass with all the shit I had to wade through. Down in the basement, the only light was at the bottom of the stairs. I pulled my red bandana over my nose and mouth, turned on my flashlight. My first step off the bottom of the stair was the scariest. I had to walk real slow to the sump pump, just a beam of flashlight in a dark, dingy basement, sloshing shit water lapping up against the bottom of my rubber boots, the top of my rubber boots. Fucking wade in the water, man. Thank God that day the sump pump was working. It took a couple hours, but when the pump sucked all the water down, solid waste and TP still covered the cement floor. I didn't know what else to do, so I went for it. Pulled the red bandana back over my nose and mouth and started scraping human excrement down the sewer hole with a heavy duty metal push broom, stepping careful because that shit was slick. Then I hooked up the hose and hosed down the whole basement, sprayed out a whole can of aerosol lavender mist. But there was another problem that day. It was when I was hosing away the shit away from the base of the boiler that I realized the line on the side of the boiler. Sometime in the night, the ship water level had reached over 2 feet high and the boiler had quit. Back in my apartment, I left my boots in the hallway. Next to my phone was a list of emergency numbers to call. Repairs would be expensive on the weekend, and my boss would be pissed, but there was no way I could fix that boiler. I ran my finger down the list. Frank's first call boiler and repair. 2 things about that company that fucked me up. The first, it took a big dick just to call up Frank's first call boiler and repair. You had to be prepared. If you fucked up the account number or the address, the guy hung up. Then you had to be specific about what you needed. Choose one: installation, replacement of parts, maintenance, and cleaning, other. You had to speak loud and clear and get to the point fast, or the guy hung up. First time I called them, it took me all day to keep the guy on the phone. And there I was again, my index finger on the telephone number, Frank's first call, boiler and repair. The running boy just wanted to run. Be prepared. I wrote down on a piece of paper the account number and the street address. Then, how do you say in 10 words or less your boiler was drowned in a ship flood? Well, the guy on the phone was as tough as ever. John Gotti in New Jersey. What's your problem? I gave him the account number and the street address. What's your problem? Other. What's your other problem? I said it fast, loud, fuck you. Boiler emergency, I said. There was a silence, just a moment, and the guy laughed. I remember you. You're the superintendent of college education. If you wait, you lose. Before I had a chance to open my mouth, the guy was talking at me again. 2 hours, he said. You be there on the stoop with the keys. If you're not on the stoop, we won't stop. In the shower, no matter how hard I scrubbed, I couldn't get the basement turd smell off me. Poured a bunch of Polo aftershave into my hands and slapped it on my neck and face, put on fresh clothes, tied a new red handkerchief around my neck, grabbed the flashlight and the keys. In the hallway, I slipped on my shrimper boots. The moment that black van pulled up in front, I knew, which is the second reason why Frank's first call boiler and repair fucked me up. Marco. 3 months earlier, the last time I was alone with Marco was in another basement, 211 East 5th Street. The first time I'd called Frank's first call boiler and repair. After getting hung up on all day, I'd finally got a repairman to come over. My boss gave me the specific instructions to stay with the repairman the whole time, just to watch him, make sure he doesn't goof off, plus you might learn something. Marco arrived in a black van, Maria Callas playing a little too loud, Baldini. He was in his late 20s, tall and thin, dark faux aviator glasses. Under his bald cap, his hair was short and jet black, orange coveralls, Marco sewed in red above his pocket. He was sullen at first, you know, like most straight guys, answered my questions with a grunt. I bought him a cup of coffee and he warmed up. Probably helped with his hangover. Turns out the oil pump had blown and we had to undo the boiler assembly. I didn't know my ass from my elbow about boilers, but my boss had told me I had to stay, so I became Marco's assistant, handing him tools and running to his van for shit. The first time I got a close look at Marco, we were taking a break, standing outside in the sunlight in front of the basement door. A smashed nose that bent off to one side, one of those pencil-thin mustaches, lips that seemed unreal the way they were red. When he took his faux aviators off, I mean, I had to stare. His eyes were light brown, almost gray. Eyes like they could never look up into the sun or at God the Father or work for Frank's first call boiler and repair. Those sensitive eyes, the thin mustache, hid his red lips, man. Marco must have known about his eyes, how he had to keep them covered up, or maybe he was just weirded out by my stare because he quick-started down the basement steps. I waited a bit before I followed him down. When I looked at him again, he was in the dark and wearing his safety glasses. The cement walls of the boiler room were only a couple feet wider than the boiler itself. The motor and the oil burner assembly were on the floor of the boiler room, right next to the pit that the boiler was set in. The whole apparatus had to come off, and then we had to bleed out the pipes, or something like that. In any case, in no time at all, the whole Megillah was torn apart, just one light in the room. I had to plug in an extension cord for another light. Marco's hands were thick and calloused, grease along the nails. On his left hand, third finger, a simple gold ring. There were boiler parts everywhere, and I had to be careful where I stepped. We talked some as we worked. Guy talked, as much as I could figure out what that is. I told him I was from Idaho, and he mistook Idaho for Iowa, and then mixed them both up with Ohio. I didn't try and correct him. He was a Yankee fan and had a motorcycle, some kind of fast Honda motorcycle. He didn't cuss like most guys. I went to ask him about his wife and if he had any kids, but decided against it. After a couple hours of handing him wrenches, after an afternoon of holding my monkey wrench on the bolt heads while he screwed the washers and nuts on tight, hours and hours of maneuvering my body around so I could get a better grip, both of us, our arms up inside the dark hole of the boiler. There was no fucking way I couldn't not touch him. Something changed. I have a theory about men working close in dark New York basements. Brings out something in you. Sometime in the late afternoon, Marco stood up. He started making a big deal about how hot the basement was. A production number of him taking off his overalls. Underneath, he was wearing one of those skinny t-shirts and a pair of jeans. White skin, lots of black hair on his chest. His jeans were some kind of designer washed out jeans. When he bent over in those jeans, I mean, he had to know he was showing hairy cleavage. Propinquity. At this one point, I'm lying next to him on the cement floor, holding some damn oil pump burner thing steady, while Marco tightened the screw down, all the while his armpits in my face. Sweat is what always tells the tale. Marco smelled like my father. And the most amazing thing, I didn't want to be in the next borough. Later on, 7:30, 8 o'clock, we were outside having a smoke. The boiler was back up and running. Marco was wearing his faux aviators and his orange overalls were back on. The tools were put away. The early evening was hot, and after a day in the dark basement, the bright burnt orange sky was good on my eyes and the air felt warm on my skin. I was sitting on the stoop. Marco was leaning against his black van. There was something different about Marco, the way he just kept standing there smoking, and his lips. Marco kept moving his red lips, as if he was trying to say something. I wanted to say something too. I mean, I felt like the boiler had lost and Marco and I were on the winning team. Didn't most guys feel this way after their hard work paid off for them? Wasn't that called camaraderie? Of course, I wanted to say something more, but Marco's lovely butt crack kept flashing up in my brain, made my breath stop, and how Marco smelled like my father. How fucked up I was, that smell was sexy. So I didn't say anything. I had no voice. My heart was broke, same way as my dick. Marco pushed away from the van, walked through all the sunset, bright orange, over to me at the stoop. I put my hand over my eyes. When his body was between me and the sun, I could see his hand stuck out. Marco shook my hand the way I always shake hands with men, too hard, all that overcompensation. Then he got in his van, started it up. I was halfway up the stoop when he called out, "Hey Ben." I had no idea Marco knew my name. So when I heard my name coming out from under that pencil-thin mustache, from out of those red lips, that place inside me that's always scared in that moment stopped being scared. How I stopped, looked at my arms, my hands, looked around me at the world. Blessed, fearless moment. When you're Catholic the way I am, you don't have to die to spend eternity in hell. Marco had his window rolled down. On the window ledge, his hairy black forearm. He reached under the visor and pulled out a pen and began writing something. Maria Callas too loud.